Hey, y'all. Today we've got a very special interview. We're going to be talking to Blake Parks, who's been an SEC official for over 20 years. He started his career on the field as a field judge and is now up in the booth as an instant replay official. It's a really fun, candid interview. Blake is a great guy and has some really fun stories about Coach Saban and my favorite coach, Coach Leach. It does start kind of in the middle and ends a little abruptly because we end up talking about some personal stuff on either side of that he may not want to share. But we hope you enjoy this and let us know in the comments if you have any questions. Blake has been great, and we hope to have him back. I hope you enjoy.
How long have you been doing the reffing?
This is my 29th year in the SEC.
Oh my gosh. Been doing that. And are you strictly replay now?
Yes, this is my 6th year in replay after 23 years on the field.
Do you miss the field?
I'm too old to run, Lucas, so
Okay.
it doesn't matter if I miss it or not. I couldn't.
Right. Well, I understand that there might be some some physical issues that come to it. I'm just curious from a psychological aspect whether you missed it or not.
It's not the same for sure, but I still am involved. And I'm in the stadium and I'm at the game. So it's still got a lot of the same flavor, but it's definitely different than being down there.
And how does the replay work? Are you in a central location or are you actually at the game? How does that work?
We're at the game, usually in a booth that's around the press box or somewhere up around the media box in each stadium. So we have a booth at every game, and I still travel to every game.
So do they have, because I know in in some of the professional leagues like the National Hockey League and certainly like the NFL, they'll have like a centralized location, but you guys are actually ostensibly, so you're in the stadium essentially.
Yeah, we have what's called a collaborative process, which means that there is somebody we can collaborate with back in the Central Video Center. But the primary decision and final decisions are made at the stadium at our level.
And who makes that final decision? Who has the final call on that stuff?
We do in the booth.
You do in the booth. Okay. Right. So it gets called up, and when they're looking at that little screen and they've got their headset on, what are the types of conversations like? Are they conveying to you what they saw, or are you simply telling them what you saw? Is there much back and forth, or is it pretty one way?
No, there's back and forth for sure. What's critical in instant replay is that we start with an assumption that the call on the field is correct.
Okay.
Then we have to have enough evidence to prove it wrong. So if we need to be talking back and forth about exactly what is the call, what did you have, what did you see, that gives us a heads up on what we're looking for.
Right. Is there, one of the questions that came up when I was talking to some colleagues of mine. So you were a field judge, is that correct? Is that where you spent most of your time? And
Yes.
for the people that don't understand that particular role, what are the things that you're focused on more than anything else?
Field judge is located down the field on the defensive side of the ball, responsible mostly the passing game or the edge running game. So we have receivers, contact on receivers, contact against receivers, receivers in and out of bounds, catch, no catch, um, blocks downfield, all those types of things is what we did deep. There's three of us back there. There's one on each line and one in the middle of the field. And we're responsible mainly for the passing game, which over my time in 29 years has changed pretty dramatically.
In what way specifically? Just the short air raid type offense, or what way has it changed so much?
The intricacy of the routes and the complication of the forward passing game in college and the tempo of the games now, number of plays being run versus in the day, it used to be we're going to establish the run game and then throw off of it to try to get down the field. When I first got in this league, Steve Spurrier was the exception. He was the guy running things nobody else was running. But now his offenses would probably be boring
Sure.
against some of the stuff that's being run today. So over my time, I witnessed an evolution, if you will, of the passing game and the tempo game in college football, which is unbelievable at this point.
So, one of my favorite coaches of all time was Mike Leach. Just in terms of a personality, he was a very, very fun guy. I'm just curious, in an offense like that, when he was at Mississippi State, does that level of intricacy, does that make your job harder?
Certainly makes the preparation harder. And not necessarily the job itself, but the scouting and the preparation of what's coming at you. I had a wise man tell me years and years ago that the more I could eliminate at the snap, the better official I would be at getting it right. So half the job is reading what's coming before it comes, and then you can be in a better position. You can have a better look. You have a better idea what you're looking for. Loved Mike Leach, by the way, and Mike Leach's story. Years and years ago, when he was at Washington State, I had his bowl game, Holiday Bowl in San Diego. It was a bowl game that had nothing on the line except pride. Mike Leach was coaching but not interested.
Okay.
So he spent the entire game, 3 hours of that game, talking to me about everything between Tennessee, Kentucky, where he had coached when we first met, and that bowl game and that trip, restaurants, sightseeing, anything he could do. We talked about between every single play. Mike Leach's play card, his playbook was written on a 3x5 index card. And he called that entire game with a 3x5 index card and never, ever really spent a moment worrying about anything that was happening on the field. Loved the guy. We're going to miss him for sure.
Oh my gosh. When you think about some of certainly one of the reasons I love college football over the NFL is just people like Leach. You get those types of people, those characters, those stories, and it's really good to hear that he was as enjoyable during the game as he certainly was during his press conferences. That's a great. Did you in your experience, and first of all, again, thank you so much for doing this. And I certainly don't want to get you into any trouble, but were there any other stories that you can think of, some coaches that maybe were super fun to work with and you had a really nice time being with them on the field?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we could spend days and days and days. Fortunately, at this level, um, almost all of these coaches are incredibly successful people that have climbed the ladder and come to this. Almost all of them are different in some way, but across the board, they're all characters. And you go in and you always have to remember that no matter what your relationship is with any coach, they're always crazy on game day, right? And that's just what they are. They're just crazy on game day. So you have to develop a relationship that will carry you through game day with a trust and an ability to communicate winning words and try to keep that thing light and progressible, or every day ends badly. But coaches can fall into all the categories. They can fall into wonderful to work with. You don't even want to see the guy. I had a coach one time tell me he wasn't speaking to me that day.
just straight out the gate during the introduction, he's like, "You and I aren't chatting."
He told me this right off the bat at the opening kickoff. I'm not speaking to you today. I've turned you over to Jesus, and this is how we're going to go from here. So the first time we had a foul, I tried to tell him who it was on. He turned his back and walked away. I thought it was over, but the funny side of that story is that every time the rest of the day that he encroached even one blade of grass onto my field, I ran him off. I ran him off, and ran him off. So they're all over the place. They really are. And some of them are so enjoyable, but some of them are hard to deal with. But most of the time, it's because they're not in their right mind on game day.
Fair enough. And how often during a season when you were, in your prime of field judging, how often would you see the same team throughout the year?
Usually no more than 3 times.
Okay.
We get around pretty good and try not to see a team too often and try not to go to a venue more than a couple of times. So you might have a couple of home games and a road game from one team. Most of the time it'd be twice, sometimes 3 times.
Right. And then with that, obviously you have postseason stuff. How is that generally assigned?
So the postseason is assigned neutrally, Lucas. You cannot work your own schools. And that is an interesting sidebar to my career because over 29 years, the Southeastern Conference has had exactly two national championships that could be worked by our association.
Oh, right.
Otherwise, we've not ever been able to have it. So officials all over the country talk about their national championships. We have never had them. Um, we even had one year where Alabama and LSU played each other, and they wouldn't let us have it. Both coaches wanted us to have it. We wanted to have it, but it just don't come around. So we're obviously interested now in what's going to happen this year, because this particular year you're not going to be able to assign officials through an entire playoff structure, not knowing how your conferences are going to advance. So we don't know how that's going to work yet, but we're hoping this will help us get some more advanced games.
And with that, so I mean, do you, just given your experience, do you have any speculation on how you think that might go, or is it just total unknown at this point?
The only model that's out there is the NFL model. The NFL model is they select postseason officials and assign them either a wild card game or a divisional round game, and then they advance from there based on performance. So we're hoping that something like that might come into play, and we can have a short window of assignments where we only know a week in advance or 10 days in advance who's going out. And then you can wait and see who wins the games to know who gets assigned. Because right now, the Southeastern Conference is going to have the lion's share every year of playoff teams and or championship teams. So it just makes it hard to get us a game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, in your experience, and I understand that a lot were not afforded to you, but was there a postseason game that you got to do?
Yeah, I've had over 25 postseason games. The 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 first year of the 14 playoff, we were fortunate and blessed enough to have the Rose Bowl game with Oregon and Florida State, which was
Oh, that's cool.
Marcus Mariota and Jameis
Yep.
Winston. That was the very first playoff game ever. We had that game, but we couldn't have been assigned the following week because I think Alabama was playing Ohio State in the other game. So he couldn't take a chance on Alabama winning and us not being able to work. So that was as far as we could go. But we've had what they call Big Six games.
Sure.
Every year they just can't have our teams ever.
Now, with if you don't mind, you said something earlier that I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily understand, myself included, which is when you talk about preparing for the game, and you're obviously going to be on the defensive side, at least watching the offenses from the defensive side. What kind of preparation do you go into? What are some of the things that you are doing, maybe personally, and then also just someone in your profession would be doing for a game?
So if I walk you through a week of in season game work, it looks something like this. We travel on Sunday coming home. When we come home on Sunday, we have to immediately begin to look at, evaluate, and grade the game we just worked. So that's pretty much each Monday up.
Right.
By Tuesday, we're into meetings, either crew meetings, conference meetings, management meetings, telling us what the flavor of the entire week was, points of emphasis going forward, those types of things. Maybe by Wednesday, you might be able to sit down a half a day, but by Thursday, you're in the scout for the next week for the teams you're fixing to work for the following week. On Friday, we travel and actually have meetings on site talking about what everyone has gathered for scouting and for tendencies and all those types of things. Saturday on game day, we have a long preliminary meeting, pregame meeting, which goes over not only the points of emphasis for that day, but also logistics and how we're going to handle things, how we're going to handle these teams, these sidelines, whatever is unique about that game. We work the game, and then on Saturday night after the game, there's reporting to do. So it's about 30 to 35 hour weeks series for most football officials during this time of year.
Now, for SEC officials, are you doing other things? Do you have another job, or is this your full-time gig?
No, I'm a recovering banker, but for the last 14 years I've been in the nonprofit lay ministry. I run a food pantry currently, but yeah, all these guys do this as a vocation, not as their primary line of work. And these guys have to. It's one of the criteria to get to this level. You must be in a career path that gives you flexibility to do this kind of thing. Fortunately for me, in the banking world, all the boards of directors that I ever worked for thought this was a good thing for the bank. This was a public relations thing for the bank. So I was always, you know, very well taken care of to go do whatever I had to do. But if you can't do that in this job, you're not going to make it very long.
Now, again, I'm not a scientist. Everybody's going to tell you that. But one thing I do know is that most people, most human beings, really enjoy being liked. And, and with that in mind, I'm just curious what brought you to refing.
That's a great question. Uh, that reminds me of something my mother asked me years and years ago. She was watching something on TV and I was into it with some coach. And she said, what would possess you to get dressed up like that, like a clown, and go out there on TV and put yourself through all of that? What part of that makes you happy, but that you enjoy doing that? It's really a good question. Um, the way I got started in officiating is not a very interesting story. It was financial, to be honest with you. When I was growing up, the minimum wage was $1.65 an hour. I could go call a little league game for $5. So, so I could control my social schedule and go make $5 instead of having a job where I had to report to make $1.65.
Yeah.
But as as this thing carried on up, as it went up the ladder, it is absolutely the most enjoyable, blessing thing that I've been through in my life because of the people I've met, the things I've seen, the experiences that come with that. And we don't really even think about what you just asked me. We don't think about the fact that it's controversial, that that it's got such consequence, that it's comes with all that. You really don't even think about it. You get to the place where your skin is thick, and you just got to trust your judgment on these things. And one thing that people need to always understand is it's not our job to go out and get everything right. That is a statement that everyone would understand about football officiating or officiating in general. The world would be different. We really have two main jobs to do this job. One is to protect the safety of the players, and two is to protect the integrity of the contest. And if we get those two things, obviously our goal is to get everything right. But there's never been a perfect game worked, and it's not even really our, a task that we think we can accomplish to work a perfect game. It's just not going to happen. You hear the comments all the time. There could be holding on every play. Well,
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
there can be lots of things on every play, but did it impact the safety or integrity? And if the answer to those two things are no, it's probably fine that we didn't get it. If everybody understood that's our role, we'd be in a better place.
Do you feel with this, maybe less so now as you're more experienced and you've seen a lot more, but certainly in the beginning, was there an internal pressure to get things right? Did you feel that, or was that the sense all the way through? Did you have that sense of those priorities going at it, or in the beginning? I'm wondering if there was that pressure because obviously you want to be very good at your job, right?
No, that's always there, and it's still there every single week. The first boss I ever worked for in the Southeastern Conference was a legendary man named Bobby Gaston, who was a long-term football official, long-term coordinator of football officials, played at Georgia Tech back in their heyday, so on and so forth. But he used to have this statement he would always say, Blake, your job today is to start perfect and improve. And so,
Right.
and so if you get that if you just get that in your mind, we always strive for that perfection, and we always have internal pressure to be better and better and better and better all the time, a continuous improvement. But at the end of the day, you just got to understand if you strive for perfection and achieve excellence, you probably had a good day.
And with that, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you're going to stay with primarily the same crew throughout the year. Is that pretty standard, or are there mixing about?
The on-field crews, the 8 guys on the field, are together all the time unless they have conflicts. Conflicts would mean Lucas can't call this particular school or can't go to this particular venue. Has a what for whatever those reasons are, business relationship, family relationship, play
Right.
coach, whatever that may be, and they swap them in and out for that. In the replay booth, we are a crew of two, and we also travel together, but not with the same crew of 8. So our crew of two is always with somebody different on the field each week.
And how many crews does the SEC field each year?
We have 9 currently. We had to add a crew this year because of bringing in Texas and Oklahoma, and that's seemed to work out very well at this point in time. But it's usually enough crews to let everyone work 11 or 12 weeks.
Okay. And you'll forgive me, these are controversial questions, but they have to be asked. Are there makeup calls? Does that happen? Like where, and you know what I'm talking about here, wherein like there's something that seems egregious, so it goes the other way each time. Because I know that's something that the fans talk about all the time.
Yeah, sure. There are never uh, overt makeup calls. Uh, People are humans, right? So you could be raked over something long enough in a day where you're convinced that you might not be seeing something correctly, but no one's making up a call. Every single snap is a pre-snap routine, a play executed, and a post-snap routine. And then you start all over on that process again. You put it away, flush it, start another play for 200 plays. That's the way that works. And you don't have time to worry about, I missed 140 plays ago.
And with that, is this the type of thing? Because again, it sounds like when you're starting this idea of constant resetting in your reps, you're constantly resetting your reps throughout the game. And then you go back on Sunday and you analyze how you did. You give yourself some grades, it sounds like. You probably get some feedback from some colleagues or maybe even some superior officials. Is there is there time in there for you to reflect on, because I appreciate what you said earlier about this striving for perfection, but you are human, things are gonna happen. Has there been anything for you, and I'm not asking you to recount something horrible, but has there been anything for you where you're like, oh gosh, wow, we might have missed that one?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't even mind recounting these. I had Alabama LSU one year. Um, it was mid 2000s. I don't remember exactly when it was, but Alabama LSU, and we were driving. Alabama was driving to win the game. I was on the pylon. I'm on the goal line on the pylon. They ran a fade route in front of me, and at the moment that I had to try to find the goal line, find the pylon, and find my receiver, I missed contact. I missed it. They knocked him down, intercepted the ball. The ball starts running back the other direction, and I'm stepping over my receiver following the interception, going, I wonder how that happened.
Right.
So, true enough, it was a horrible thing. Maybe the wrong team won. I don't know. LSU intercepted the pass and ended up winning the game. Um, but yeah, agonize that over that forever and ever. I mean, I don't forget it right now. Even all these years later, I can remember that play. There's always plays we'd like to have back. Um, in my career, started before instant replay. I can actually remember 3 or 4 games that I think the outcome was impacted by a bad call that would have been changed today. But that's just something you throw in your pocket and live with it. But every single day, no one is harder, no one is a more harsh critic on us than us. And the best officials do not try to run away from that call. They try to look themselves in the mirror and try to figure out, how did that happen? How can I never let that happen again? And, I can forgive myself today because you can't see three things at one time.
Right.
But it was perfect. It was a perfect storm, but it still was a huge miss at a bad time. And you have to live with those.
With with the with the pressure of all this, and obviously you were kind of talking about the joy being the people. What is there anything that just pops in your mind where it was like, you know what, this is I never would have experienced this in the entirety of my life were I not an SEC official.
Absolutely. The people I'm surrounded with over the last 3 decades are some of the most incredible, successful, grounded people that I have ever met. I would consider, if you ask me for my 15 best friends, I would guarantee you 10 of them are in football. And it's just over time, there is something special about the people that commit at this level to everything it takes to be successful and be around them. Yeah, I will never be able to repay that. And hopefully that's how people feel about me at some level. But that is the best blessing of this whole thing is the people for sure.
One of the one of the things that and again, fandom is by definition a delusional state of mind. And I one of the things that gets talked about is certainly from a Texas point of view is their relief of leaving Big 12 officials and moving in to a world of SEC officials. And you've been around long enough to experience the expansion and now it's expanding again. I'm curious when Missouri came in, when you had A&M come in, was there was there a difference? Was there an education for them to understand like, oh, you know what? Maybe this is a call in the SEC that wasn't in the Big 12.
There is. There is a learning curve there. And in spite of a national uh, education program to try to bring us to consistency, we still work for separate coordinators. And each one of those coordinators has their own opinions and their own ideas and their own systems. And there is subtle differences. Now, I'll say this. Um, there is a much more consistent approach coast to coast today than there was 20 years ago. So it's probably less than it was then. But yes, when even before that, when Arkansas and South Carolina came into the league, Arkansas was coming out of the Southwest, and they were having to adjust because that was a high octane offensive brand of football, and they were coming to a much more physical, hands-on, fight in the trenches, and they wanted holding on every play.
Right.
They thought every play was holding when the truth was that's where the battles were fought in this league, and that's kind of where we are. If you've been listening to the interviews with Sark in Texas, he's been actually saying over the last couple of years that he was preparing for that by being more physical in defensive line in particular and larger and up front because he knew that's what was going to be facing him when he got here. So we'll see how that works. But the Big 12 was known as wide open, run them, shoot them, score more points than the other team. And the Southeastern Conference is a different personality than that, for sure.
Yeah, it does. It seems like, every league, certainly you want to get down to the minutia, but every team has a vocabulary in how they operate their game. And I think that's the big difference for, fans coming in. And you see this, and this is something I think you probably experienced yourself is, when you do get into the postseason and you're a Big 12, you're an ACC team, and you may have Pac-12 referees and they may have a slightly different vocabulary on the game that they're accustomed to. Obviously, we're not speaking completely different languages here, but there might be some subtlety in the way that they operate that for a fan, and again, I don't think the fandom should be the metric for what is right and what is wrong, but at the same time, it is that visual aspect from the outside looking in. Seems as if things are just different drastically, even though what you're pointing out is there's a lot of subtlety in it.
Yeah, well, Lucas, you're right, exactly. And fans do play a role because let's be honest right now, what do fans want is more points,
Sure.
right? So we've seen rules and philosophies slant to reward more points. It certainly has gone that way over time. I'll give you a perfect example of how this worked. When Coach Hugh Freeze was at Ole Miss, he was kind of the first team in the Southeastern Conference to try to run the up tempo, fast as you could go offense. We really weren't used to that. And with that comes some mechanics of how you handle substitutions, when you'll let them snap the ball, how to be equitable between offense and defense. Well, that particular year, he went to I believe it was the Sugar Bowl, and he had a Big 12 crew in that game. And the Big 12 crew had been working in a league where there was a lot of that kind of pace and a lot of that going on. And he came back and affected change for us before the following season about how we needed to emulate more of the mechanics that the Big 12 was using at that point in time so that his team could go faster. And so now over time, we have 4, 5, 6 teams that do that. We're much more accustomed to it. But in the beginning, that was not an easy thing to do. We were not used to that. And it took a bowl game with another conference for him to come back and sell it.
And that bowl, I mean, it sounds as if the league listened. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh yeah, we're continuously evolving. We have to listen, but the goal is to be more consistent across the country. And each league just doesn't play the same brand of ball, and it's hard to officiate. But we're learning that as we go. So now, matter of fact, I go back to the game I told you about at the Rose Bowl. Oregon was the fastest team
Oh yeah,
at that point in time.
yeah. That was Chip Kelly's offense, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we were not accustomed to that, and it took some getting used to. But now in our league, we have Tennessee and Ole Miss and Auburn and and God knows who else that run at that pace.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, I think, runs at that pace. So we got to get used to it because that's the game we're officiating.
How much during your prep do you get into really understanding the type of offense that they run so you can then one be in position to make the call, but also understand the nuances of what's going on so you're allowed to what's the best way of phrasing this? So you're accustomed to what's happening, so you're letting the fair things happen is a better way of phrasing that maybe.
Very much. That's very much a week to week exercise. On Friday night in the meetings, these guys will go over running game tendencies, passing game tendencies, and special team tendencies because each team is going to do something different, and they will try to speculate at the time what that team is going to actually do against their opponent. Of course, we don't have that information. We don't have the game plan, but that is very much part of the week of preparation is trying to prepare for what each team's tendencies are.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I just want to do a quick diversion here because we did talk about fans, and I know that fans when they think of referees, they generally have one question. And if you don't mind, if you could just give us your home address, phone number, I think that would be great. If we could just let the internet know that.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that because when the game I was telling you about, after that game, I had my telephone monitored by the FBI for 30 days.
Oh my gosh.
Because of the death threats that were coming in.
Oh man.
After that time. So
this is that LSU game you're talking about?
Yeah. They can
find
me when they want to.
Oh,
they have a way of finding me for sure.
Well, Blake, listen, I really appreciate your time and your candor with all this. This has been a really good time. I'd love to do it again if you've ever got the time because it's been really fun chatting with you. Just out of curiosity, do you have, because people are going to ask, do you have any Saban stories that you'd like to share?
Love Saban, actually. Coach Saban is not what his
persona
reputation is.
Yeah, okay.
To be honest with you, Coach Saban has a standard, and he expects his team to play at that standard, and he also expects your officials to officiate at his standard. And he was particularly kind to veterans. He likes veterans, but the way I would set this up is the bigger the game was for Coach Saban, the easier it was to work.
What do you attribute that to?
It goes back again. When he's beating you 50-0, he's expecting you not to let up.
Right.
He's expecting his team not to let up. Therefore, he was always harder to work for in those games than he was if it was, 21-21 in overtime. But he has the utmost respect for me. Here's the other thing people don't know about Coach Saban. He was always a very objective critic. So Coach Saban, understanding that the game of college football is bigger than his game today, and that the role officiating plays and coaches play, players play, so on and so forth, he would be very objective. He'd say, guys, y'all got this right. I didn't like it, or you missed this and we need to look at it. But he was always one of our most objective critics. And that is not easy to do in the middle of a football season with all the pressure that's going on and being endured at that level by those teams. But he never was unfair. I mean, I really have nothing but respect for him. And I really believe to this day that's part of the reason he's not coaching.
The reason you don't think he's coaching because the standard has changed, or what do you mean exactly?
I don't think that he liked the current situation in the game, and I don't think that he particularly wanted to coach that way. And I just think that he decided it was time for him to let it bypass. I didn't see last week's game day, but everybody says he was incredible in game day. That doesn't surprise me.
Well, I think what we saw on that game day is something that you're alluding to is maybe that reputation, that veneer maybe was down a little bit, and you got to see a little bit more of the man as opposed to the coach. And he even vocalized a couple times. He was having a good time. He was visibly enjoying himself doing that. And I think for someone that has been in this job for so long and has such a high standard, but also a great reputation for being who he is, to see that different side of him, I think was really enjoyable for people. So
People didn't know that. I think Lucas said they didn't want to wear that. I've never had an irrational conversation with him. Now we disagree, but normally he'll take your explanation and he'll go on. And I was the kind of official where I would let you react to anything one time. I think everyone's they've got the flexibility in my mind to react in any way you want to. I didn't care what you said or what you did. If it was our initial reaction to a call, I'm fine with that. It's after that when we've had the dialogue that I can separate him. And he and I never had an irrational word over all the games I ever worked for him.
well, that's wonderful. I mean, it's been really, like I said, Blake, this is awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us.
And there you have it. We hope you enjoyed this, and be sure to like and subscribe to these videos. It really does help us, cost you nothing, and does a good service to us so we can continue to bring you this type of stuff. So thank you so much, and we'll see you out there.